Good morning and good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to our LinkedIn 101 for Lawyers program. I'm really glad to see so many people attending today's session, as LinkedIn is an important tool for legal marketing and business development. I know many of you have heard me say this quite a bit. This is the first of a two-part series. The second session will be offered in 2022 and will focus on LinkedIn for business development. Our lead presenters today are Gina Rubel and Jennifer Simpson-Carr, who are leaders at Fury Rubel Communications, one of the firms we work with on public relations and media strategy. Gina is the founder and CEO, a former litigator, and has run the legal marketing agency for 20 years. She has written 2 books on legal marketing, which includes the use of social media, and has been working with Lathrop GPM and many of the people who are on this call today since the beginning of 2021. Jennifer is the agency's Director of Business Development. Prior to joining Fury Rubel, Jennifer spent more than 10 years leading business development and marketing communications at Am Law 200 law firms in New York and mid-market law firms throughout the United States. Jennifer has developed effective LinkedIn programs for law firms and has trained hundreds of lawyers and legal marketers on how to effectively use LinkedIn for business development. In addition, I'm super pleased today to say that we are joined by Peter Daniel, who, as I believe all of you know, is Lathrop GPM's General Counsel, and Sarah Linticum, our PRC member who is focused on social media. And they are joining us to discuss the ethical considerations that we all have to be cognizant of as we leverage LinkedIn more for both marketing and business development purposes. Gina, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for having us. Sorry, my mouse wasn't working, even though we did our test. So what's really important is just to set the stage and understand that both attorneys and staff are using social media. So Jennifer, would you like to give us some background statistics, please?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again for having us. And as you'll see throughout this program, our team is very driven by data. The recommendations that we use as an agency are always driven by data. So there are a number of slides today that support what is the business case for using LinkedIn. So you'll see on this slide that 98% of employees have at least one personal social media account. So your attorneys and your staff, and 50% of those employees have shared brand messages about your brand. And so what I want to start by saying is that many of your staff and attorneys are already sharing communications and messaging about the firm. And so as we walk through the program today, what we hope you will find is that taking a strategic approach to using the platform can make LinkedIn work for you personally, professionally, as well as for the firm. It can be a very effective tool for developing network for you individually and for the firm as well. It also helps build brand awareness and support the business development process. And again, as you'll see here, some statistics. I won't read them all to you, but 96% of lawyers are on LinkedIn. And so what we talk to attorneys about all the time is that if you are not there or you're not using it well, your competitors are. And so this is a big business case for you to be on there, updating your profile and using it well. If you look towards the bottom of the slide, you'll see that 59% of C-suite executives and 31% of in-house counsel have reported that they access LinkedIn at least weekly. And what we hear often from attorneys is, well, I don't see my general counsel and C-suite executives liking and sharing. And what we have found through research, a very high level industry research report that's done every year, 74% of in-house counsel actually reported that they use LinkedIn in listen-only mode. It's a trend that we now call in the industry the invisible user. So I'll argue the point before it's brought up today that even though you aren't seeing your contacts every single day liking and sharing, they are out there and they are listening and they are looking to see who is sharing the information and what content they are sharing.
And Jennifer, I'm going to guess that many of our participants are those invisible users as well, because that's very common with lawyers. However, we're going to make the business case as to why you need to be more active. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter and Sarah and put myself on mute. And Peter, if you would just give me the cue as to when you want me to change slides, I will do so.
All right, let's have the first slide. Thanks for joining, everybody. As noted, I'm Peter Daniel. I'm General Counsel, and I'm joined by Sarah Linticum. And we're going to run through these top 10 rules of lawyer communications using social media. We're going to start with Sarah kind of giving you the state rules that apply to you, and then I'm going to go through some practical applications. I don't know that we'll have time during this presentation for questions, but we will make a handout available through Compass when we post this recorded session to Compass. We have a handout that covers everything we're talking about today and has some resources and sites for you. So look for it there if you're interested in more details. And with that, I would say we're going to touch on each of these 10 things as we go through, but we can look at the next slide, which just
Cool. Thanks, Peter.
covers some of the rules. And Sarah, take it.
Very cool. I guess where I'll start is, I think we're all familiar as attorneys that the rules of professional conduct really are specific to the jurisdiction where you're licensed. All of the states where we have offices have adopted some form of the ABA's model rules. So kind of using that as a baseline. Just as a quick refresher, Rule 7 is the rule that governs information about legal services. And so that's where we'll start. Rule 7.1 specifically is where you can't say, it provides that you can't say anything in a communication that is false or misleading about yourself or the services that you provide. So to the extent that you are posting on your LinkedIn profile, please, make sure that your statements are truthful. Don't omit any fact that would make the statement as a whole misleading. And the important thing I'll note about 7.1 is that it applies to all communications. It does not apply to just advertisements. So please keep that in mind with any content that you're putting out there on social media, not just LinkedIn, so any social media. And then 7.2 is the rule that applies to what we traditionally think of as advertisements. The ABA actually updated its rules in 2018 to kind of modernize the rules to make clear in part that they do apply to social media. Not many states yet have adopted that. I think within our footprint, Colorado is one that has actually adopted that. So Colorado attorneys, please be aware of that. One practice tip, posts can actually be considered legal advertising depending on the content that you put out there. And just law firm websites in general, most jurisdictions consider them to be attorney advertising. And so we have our disclaimers that are required under various rules. California, Colorado, Massachusetts, Missouri, all treat that. So social media, by their very nature, can be considered advertisements. A California ethics opinion is very helpful in explaining when your post might cross over from just a communication that needs to be truthful and honest and then becomes an advertisement. And the question that the Committee on Ethics out there in California kind of found was the important thing to consider is, are you putting yourself out there as available for employment? If you are, that's when your post or your content goes kind of transitions from just a communication and turns into an advertisement. So things like articles that perhaps you've written about PFAS because you're Sarah Linticum and you're a dork, that is a communication and you don't need to worry about it being, an advertisement that requires you to comply with all the other provisions about advertisements, but something where you're saying, oh, I've won a personal injury case, please call me for a free consultation. That's me putting myself out there and asking to be hired. So in that instance, I need to take a look at 7.2 in my jurisdiction and then comply with all the other advertising rules. Like, for example, in Missouri, we have a specific disclaimer that we have to use. Kansas, I think, has obligations about keeping advertisements in the file for a certain period of time, things like that. So I touched on how, again, any content you put out there in social media needs to comply with 7.1's requirement of being truthful. And the thing about LinkedIn in particular, that when I was researching this, that kept coming up, it has the opportunity for people to endorse you and endorse you for skills and things like that. And the question becomes, what if you get endorsed for some skill that you don't have, or that you might not actually have? And there, the question is that kind of a false or misleading statement about you? And a DC ethics opinion that I found said that, yes, that could be false or misleading. And we as attorneys have an obligation to get out there and review our social media or review our LinkedIn profile from time to time. And if we don't have that skill, we should actually go out there and remove that from our page and make sure that we're not misrepresenting to the public that that's a skill we have when in fact we don't. And we should only have endorsements up there that people who know us and have observed our skills can actually attest to. So think about that to the extent people are putting information or endorsing you for certain things. And the last thing I wanted to say is we're all pretty good about knowing that we can't, breach the attorney-client privilege or share information like that. But Rule 1.6 does impose on us a duty of confidentiality, and that's true for social media content as well. It applies to former clients. So anything that you put up on your social media, you have to have informed client consent to do that. You can't just go out there and post information about your clients or cases that would be specific to them without their knowledge. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Peter, and thank you guys.
Thank you, Sarah. Next slide, please, which is really just showing you where we have offices, which you all know, but is a reminder that you need to check your local rules of where you're operating and where you're publishing. And with the nature of our firm and the nature of our practice, we try and kind of resort to the lowest common denominator, if you will. If there's a close question as to whether it's going to constitute an advertising or not, we're going to probably apply the standard of the most difficult state to comply with, include the disclaimers or disclosures that go along with that, just again, because of the multi-state nature of our practice. I promised when Jasmine asked us to participate in this, I promised to not be too down on social media and to try and make this as practical and useful as possible. But there are some things you can do to put yourself into difficulty with any kind of media, but social media in particular being the topic for today. And one of them is to inadvertently create an attorney-client relationship. It is shockingly easy to create an attorney-client relationship when you don't even intend it. The standard is really low, and it's almost entirely subjective, based not on your belief, but on the would-be client's belief. So when you are sharing information on social media, you really have to pay attention to that line between general information, communications with regard to broad subject matters, and giving actual legal advice, and being careful that somebody couldn't take what you are saying as legal advice to them. That protects us. It also protects them, because in many instances, you wouldn't know really what kind of legal advice they need. So just be aware when you start communicating to be careful of not crossing that line. The next thing I would briefly touch on, and I know you've all heard this now for the last 15 to 20 years with the prevalence of social media, but that is basically that the internet lives forever, and there's really no legitimate expectation of privacy, to borrow a phrase from constitutional law, anymore with respect to social media. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Anything you post certainly is going to invite criticism. It may get you reported to a bar disciplinary committee. Even if you're posting it in what you think is the safe environs of your own Facebook page. There was a South Carolina lawyer who was suspended for 6 months for making some, heinous statements about the George Floyd situation, about people with tattoos. It was not on his firm website, it was on his personal Facebook page, but he identified himself as a lawyer. He was easily traced as a lawyer. And although the South Carolina Supreme Court has not yet adopted the model rule changes with regard to diversity and inclusion requirements for lawyers, it still found that lawyer's statements so grossly invaded the profession's standing as to be incendiary. And on that basis alone, they suspended him for 6 months. So the other thing I would say is, even if you think you're tweeting or posting on Facebook among a private group, friends only, it only takes one person to copy and post that outside of what you consider your friend network or your safe network, and then it's exposed to the world and it goes viral, and it doesn't really matter that you intended to be private. So you just always have to be careful in your communications that are going to go out into the world. Sarah mentioned several of the specific rules with regard to communications. Rules 4.1, truthfulness to statements and others. 4.2, communications with unrepresented persons. 4.4, respect for rights of third persons. 3.6, trial publicity. I rolled those all out together under this umbrella. You can't use social media to do what you can't do personally or through other means. In other words, you can't create a false Facebook person that's not a real person and then use that to friend judges or friend witnesses or friend would-be clients or would-be jurors. You can't use a computer to create a fake or false persona on a Match.com site or other websites about an attorney that you don't like. Those things will get you suspended. They will get you fired. In the instance of the lawyer who thought it was cute and clever to create false, fake Match.com profiles for a lawyer didn't like, he did it from his computer and at work, and he did it during work hours. And it was really a very simple matter for them to trace that back to him. Got him suspended by the Disciplinary Committee of Illinois, got him immediately terminated by his firm. So what's cute and clever can be traced back to you. There's no basis for doing that with your firm computer. Please don't do it at all, but if you do it, don't do it with our computers. Be careful what you post or copy from the internet. We had an unfortunate experience 6-9 months ago where we learned that something that a lawyer put on they did a webinar type thing, then they posted their deck to the internet. 5-6 years later, somebody found it, recognized that the images that the lawyer had grabbed from the internet belonged to a service that collects money for the use of the copyrighted matters. And we had to pay approximately $5,000 for images that were on a website that had long been removed, but was out there once because they hadn't been, the permission hadn't been sought or the license hadn't been reviewed. And as a law firm that creates and defends trademarks, we really were not in a good position to argue that we shouldn't have to pay for stealing somebody's copyrighted work. So please be careful. Marketing can help with that. We have images that we have paid for and licensed, or they can help you identify what are truly free images that you can use. The last thing I think I'll say is, again, it lasts forever. You're less anonymous than you think you are. What was dumb in the past, you might have gotten away with because it was in a crowd of people and they would forget or they wouldn't pass it beyond the environs of the bar or the cocktail party. But again, it's just out there forever now. You can't hide from it. You can't use it to make statements about judges that you don't like. That actually impacts a number of rules, but including candor to the tribunal. But at least with respect to one lawyer in Florida, his comments about judges he didn't like went so far that they were determined to be essentially terroristic. And he was not only completely disbarred, he was also arrested. So I hope that was not too heavy, Jasmine, but really in summary, be aware of all the rules in the states where you operate. Work with marketing, work with the PRC, and use your common sense, and social media will be your friend. Thanks.
Oh, Peter, at this point, if we were live, I'd ask everybody to raise their hands and say who doesn't want to keep going with the presentation because they're too afraid to ever use social media. But no, I say that in jest. Everything, I hadn't heard about the one about the Match.com, so I want to see that. You have to send me that link. The thing is, it's just use common sense. And if you're not sure, ask. And you have all the resources at Lathrop GPM to ask. And that's really what it comes down to. We've only seen those heinous incidents because, well, somebody didn't use common sense, frankly, or they didn't ask. So the other thing I want to mention is if you're working on a particular type of matter, and you have colleagues working on similar types of matters, before you start posting articles or opinions or things like that, just make sure that they're not arguing the exact opposite as you. So it's something, it doesn't fall under the ethics rules. It's more of a common sense thing, but we've actually seen that in our course of business where it created a lot of internal strife in a particular firm. So lots to think about. However, we're going to talk about the basics of LinkedIn, and we're going to talk about the type of content, and we're going to give you some instructions on the how-to. So there's two types of content from the big picture umbrella perspective. There's evergreen and timely. Evergreen are those answers to FAQs that people always ask you in your industry groups or practice areas. Timely information is that the same things you use with your client alerts, the types of things that a Supreme Court decision came down, or, you know, if you were following Jennifer, who was it? Elon Musk, who lost his company, what, 20 or 40 billion dollars with his tweet 2 days ago or the day before yesterday. So you want to think about how these things, what's timely and relevant to your audience. And so evergreen stuff is good to share. And I'm going to get further into this whenever you really don't have anything timely to share and you want to be engaging your audience. Timely information is always my preference. And the keys are usefulness, timeliness, relevant content that establishes trust and validates the firm and attorneys. Interestingly enough, in law.com, I think it was, no, I'm sorry, Law 360 this morning, there was an article written about lawyers should not send their press releases to GCs. And I thought, well, what lawyers are sending their press releases to GCs, and why do GCs care? Like, what's in it for them? So, and the reason why I say that is we're not just telling you this, the industry is telling lawyers this. So if that's something you would do, they're fine to share in social media, but if you're sending your GCs something, make sure it's relevant and timely and very specific to the issues that they deal with on a regular basis. Jennifer, would you like to talk about some more stats?
Absolutely. And your comments on what GCs care about was a perfect segue to this slide. This is the industry report that I mentioned before. So earlier when we started, I had mentioned the volume of attorneys and in-house counsel that are online. But what's important as you think about what content to share, what information might be interesting to your contacts to see, the number one most valued reason that in-house counsel and C-suite executives will read a piece of content is for its utility. And what that means is, how can they utilize this information and apply it to their job? We hear over and over again, in-house counsel say, don't tell us what happened, tell us what we should do and how we should be prepared. And the survey supports that exact sentiment. And as you think about, again, the type of content to share, what you find that has utility can be various forms of content. And so if you, sorry, next slide, Gina. If you look at this chart, it shows you the top 5 most preferred types of content that in-house counsel and C-suite executives prefer to see. And so this is, you'll have the slides. This is a great reference to assess what type of content you're going to share. So think about assessing the content with a utility. Think about when you're writing the content, it should have utility. How can this be applied to my position? And then use this chart to assess the type of content that would be most valuable and most likely read by your key target audiences. And you'll hear throughout the program, and you've already heard so many benefits of using LinkedIn. We've put in bold here a number that we think that are most valuable for Lathrop GPM, but frankly, everything on this list is an added benefit by using LinkedIn and using it well.
And I want to reiterate that and hit a point home. Client and talent retention is huge right now. So if you think about what they're calling the talent wars in the legal industry, even posting something, if you're a partner and you know that something went really well for an associate or another partner, sharing their story and giving them a pat on the back on LinkedIn is a great way to show that you work as teams. So think about that too. It's not just about what others read, it's also about how they perceive you. Are you collaborative? Are you a team player? Are you a problem solver? So when you think about the type of content you're sharing, how does that come across? Are you the thought leader in a particular area of law? So you want to think about how those things come across all the time.
Absolutely. And you touched on this a bit, Gina, but it's important to share individually. We also hear a lot while the firm's sharing it, managing partners sharing it. Brand announcements by individuals are shared 24 times more when they're shared by an employee compared to the brand itself. And so what that means is the example Gina gave, if someone on your team or someone in the firm receives a recognition, an accolade, their article is published as a byline, that message shared by you as an individual attorney will receive greater reach and the opportunity for greater engagement and shares coming from you as a trusted member of the LinkedIn network than it will typically for the brand itself if Lathrop GPM shares it.
So I mentioned the evergreen and the timely content, and now we're going to get into what we call curated content and created content. And this is a 3-to-1 ratio. So you want to be sharing curated content every 3-to-1 of what you've created. So what you're patting yourself on the back for. So it could be case outcomes, things that are happening in your community. Let's say you serve on a board of directors of your state bar association or of a diversity organization. You want to be sharing what's happening with those. It helps to showcase you as a full individual. Educational programs and CLEs, things that are happening like Supreme Court decisions and SEC regs. And you don't have to write an article or a blog every time you share something that's happening. None of us have that kind of time. But you do need to say something. So please know, and I'm going to say this very clearly, when you share something on social media, always answer the question, why? In other words, why are you sharing it? Why does it matter? So, this is a great article about X, which really showcases ABC. And again, we've already talked about sharing law firm and other employee news, not just your own. And so these are just the types of curated content. And the reason why it's a 3-to-1 ratio is because we're dealing with algorithms with LinkedIn and Facebook and all social media. And the more you only share about yourself and from your own website, the less your content gets seen because it's in an algorithm. So always, always share other things. And it could be your favorite business podcast if you're a podcast listener. It could be just a resource. It could be, don't forget, so in Pennsylvania, we had elections yesterday. Don't forget to get out and vote today. So think about all of the different things that could be shared and things that you're passionate about and things that you do as a professional outside of simply practicing law. Not to say practicing law is simple, but you do that all the time. And I say it's not simple because that's why I left the practice. I love what I do in communication. So Jennifer, do you want to share some of these examples?
I do. I just want to touch on a point from the last slide, just to reiterate that while we've talked about adding value to your target audience in terms of utility, what we see and what I saw in-house was that humanizing content, which is how we've coined it, is shared and engaged with exponentially more than content-heavy, topic-heavy content. So while we are telling you to share information that will help your contacts do better at their job, anticipate things coming down the pike, it's also important, as Gina said, to share this other content because people are looking, and I think we've learned the last 18 months that people do care about other issues that you're involved in as an attorney and the culture of the firm as well.
You know, I'm gonna second that. And one of the things that's funny, we do a lot of practice what you preach. And there was a day that the entire team was on our morning Zoom call, and I did a screenshot and I posted it without telling them on social media. And I just said, I want to thank my team for always showing up. It's a real pleasure to work with all of you. Something as simple as that on LinkedIn had over 6,000 views in 24 hours because it was humanized. Obviously, I tagged the members of the team, which means their network saw it, but over 6,000 views. And it really, the only thing it did, it showed the culture of Fiore Rubel in that we really are collaborative and appreciative. So I share that because that's even a screenshot of, with permission. I always ask the team for permission. Peter, I see you looking and I'm thinking, better say that. But Jen, do you want to just share some of the curated content examples that we—
Absolutely. These are 3 great examples that we found, 2 attorneys and 1 from the firm, where you're sharing content that is valuable for your network, but not necessarily content produced by the firm. And these are great examples. I won't read each of them, but you can see that there's an employment matter, a podcast episode, there's a settlement message, and a webcast promotion. And what this curated content can do is show your network that you're tuned into what's happening in your industry. You're aware of events, you're aware of podcasts, of timely information, and you've taken the time to share that information and be a resource for your network.
And Megan's on the far right, really just that one sentence answers the why. This development will be of interest to those of you tracking the status of restroom access issues in Minnesota. Simple. Didn't have to be a diatribe, did not have to be a brief, which is not brief, just a simple statement and it really, the person seeing that goes, oh, I should read further. Then we have your created content that your marketing department is always talking to you about. So we're not going to get too deeply involved in what it is, but we'll talk about how to share it. It's everything from your blogs, your webinars, recording your webinars and creating articles from the transcripts, which I know your marketing department can support you with. Sharing firm news, it doesn't hurt. It just shouldn't be the only thing you share. Webinars and things of that nature. And also sharing or welcoming other members of the firm to your teams, sharing other attorney bios. I would never share my own website bio on my LinkedIn page, but I just shared that we hired 2 people and I shared them each individually so I could link to their bio and said, welcome to the team. You know, we look forward to working with you. Couple, you know, I think it was 3 sentences. If you'd like to learn more about Elizabeth, click, you know, here's her bio. So you could also be doing that and showing your audience, including your clients, that your firm is growing, your firm is strong, your firm is out there. And people want to be working there. Jen?
So these are just some examples from the firm where they have shared, where you have shared content that you have created or that you are leading, or congratulatory messages from for members of your firm. And you'll see here that there are individuals tagged. When you are tagged by the firm or another individual, you will receive a notification on LinkedIn. So it is a very easy step when you are tagged in a post to, of course, confirm the content is something you want to share, but then go ahead and share it, as Gina said, with a short sentence or 2 to communicate why it's important to your network.
And while we're going to talk about commenting and sharing in just a few moments, these are the exact kinds of things you should be looking for I encourage all of you, if you're not already doing it, to follow Lathrop GPM on LinkedIn. So you go on there and you look up Lathrop GPM, and then it'll have a button that says follow, and you click on it. So then you will be getting the information, so that then when you see these posts, you can be liking them, commenting on them, and sharing them. So Jasmine, if I may, I'd love for you to join us for just a second, if you can. We've talked a lot about sharing content on LinkedIn, but we did want to note that the created content that you share can also be repurposed in syndication, and then those posts can also be shared on social media. So Jasmine, do you want to just reiterate that as it relates to JD Supra?
Sure. Just so everybody's aware, we do work with a company called JD Supra. Some of you may have heard of them. They're one of two companies that are best positioned in the industry to repurpose content for law firms to broad networks. In fact, JD Supra is proud to say that they have, I believe it's 95% of members of American Corporate Council in their network. But in addition to that, they also have a tremendous number, I don't know the full number, of just individuals. And these individuals may be at in-house counsels, offices in big corporations. They may be at smaller family-owned businesses. They're everyone from a random individual who signs up to alerts, to CEOs, to business people, business developers at companies, to accountants, to other lawyers at other law firms. So we work with them to share a large variety of our content, and we will be working with them hopefully next year to share a lot of our events as well. And that can really expand the brand recognition of the firm, as well as our attorneys as individuals, across a much wider reach than we can do on our own.
And if you're ever wondering, where do I start about when it comes to creating content? If you want to author it, this is a good slide for you. You'll have access to these to look at and think through, okay, I've identified the topic, what's the format I want to use, and then go through approvals and submissions and things of that nature. So, and your marketing department's always available to help you with created content. I'm just going to throw this out there because I can't help myself. When you're looking at new business development or RFPs, if there's a specific topic that you want to highlight, go to marketing and let them know, because that's the perfect time to be authoring something and getting it published to demonstrate your thought leadership, not just say it. And then we get it published on JD Supra, and then you share it on LinkedIn, and we're back to where we're supposed to be. So here's a good example of Lathrop GPM's account on JD Supra. So you can see this is just a small number of articles that have been published there. And then they also share them on Twitter, which is the way they share, but then you could also share those links on LinkedIn.
And I mentioned earlier that strategically approaching LinkedIn can support the business development process. And while I can assure you that I have examples of new business that has been secured as a result of LinkedIn posts and LinkedIn engagement, that is the holy grail. What it really, just to set expectations, what it can really do is support brand awareness, understanding, a greater understanding of what you do as an attorney, the types of clients that you serve, and the types of clients and work that the firm does. And so this slide just shows that employee-generated leads from social media convert 7 times greater than leads coming from the brand social media. Again, it goes back to the fact that you've built a network that has connected with you because they like you, they trust you, they respect you as a leader in your industry. And this particular slide, I think, is compelling in terms of supporting business development and efforts.
And that being said, even after your webinars, if you've connected with certain people or want to connect with them and you're not already connected on LinkedIn, that's the perfect time to connect there and to start engaging. Jennifer and I were just at a national conference for the Legal Marketing Association. We made sure to connect with everyone new that we had met on LinkedIn. I can tell you, as a result of the engagement there, we've already gotten 2 new business requests for proposals, not just leads, but requests for proposals. And all the communication is happening in LinkedIn. So if you think it doesn't happen there, and I'm telling you as a professional service provider, it really does. And it does happen with GCs. It does happen with C-suite executives, not as much with procurement departments, but they're still going to be validating you when they look at you and your firm, and they're also going to be your silent listeners. So we're going to talk about some best practices, and we are just under 20 minutes. So I'm going to go a little bit quickly through here. I'm going to remind you that you will have these slides available to you. And this is just some instructions. Jasmine, did you want to share something?
Thank you. I was just going to chime in on the prior message that you were saying about connecting with people on LinkedIn after conferences. I completely concur with that. The only thing I would add is try to add a personal message. One of my pet peeves is when I come back from a conference, and not that Gina and Jennifer did this, but 20 people connect with me, and it's just the quick, I want to connect, I want to connect, I want to connect.
Right.
In some cases, I don't remember these people. I know I met with them, but I don't know why I talked to them, what we talked about. So try to add a personal note in there about what you like discussing with them, or something about the conversation you had with them when you connect.
Always add a personal note. I agree. And remember, so one of the things I do in the notes that I send is I can always go back to that note when, let's say I'm talking to that person later, or Jennifer says, oh, well, we have to add them to the CRM. Where did you meet them? My note will say, it was such a pleasure to meet you at XYZ conference. And then I can give her that information when she's making sure that I've updated our CRM, because she makes sure I do those things. So anyway, back to optimizing your LinkedIn profile. This is really the 101, but these 7 things are key. Use the name as that, use the same name as the one on your website. So if it's James, use James, not Jim, because that's how people are going to be searching for you. Even if they're searching for Jim, you can put it in the about. I'll show you that. Use the same professional headshot that you have on your website. Use descriptive language in your headline. And I'm going to go into these in more detail. Include your contact details, create your vanity URL, include your services, and make sure they're actually your services, not something that somebody else endorsed you for that you don't actually do. Because as we heard earlier from Peter and Stephanie, you have an obligation to remove things you don't do. Am I going too fast, Peter? And make sure you are associated with Lathrop GPM, LLP. That's really important, and I will show you why. So first of all, these are really detailed instructions. Where do you start? You start at the home button when you're in LinkedIn. Then you click on your name. Now, if we're starting from scratch and you don't have a profile, talk to Stephanie or Jasmine or somebody on your BD team, because we didn't go that far to how to start from scratch. But this is where you would start if you have a profile, but there's really nothing on it. So you can, just by clicking on the headshot, you can edit your headshot, and clicking on this, oh, didn't mean to do that. This banner up here, you could have a branded banner or a message that you wanted to say, or, you know, if you are a photographer in your you know, I would recommend, however, asking your BD team for a branded image that can go on your LinkedIn profile. When you go to edit, everywhere where you edit, you will see this pencil. So when you click on the pencil, something pops up. This is pretty simple stuff. Your name. If you have a difficult name to pronounce, add an audio recording. I can tell you on the West Coast, people pronounce R-U-B-E-L as Rubel. On the East Coast, we pronounce it Ruble. And Furia is an Italian, it's actually my maiden name. It's, people say Furia, So I audio record that. That doesn't just help me. It actually helps people interacting with me because they can go there. Let's say Jasmine didn't know how to pronounce it and she was introducing me to do a CLE. She could look at it there. So it always makes your interactions better. I like to have personal pronouns, so I've included them. You don't have to. The headline is one of the most important things. This is where you have this prime 120 character real estate that you can say what type of law you do and who you serve. So for me, it says high stakes public relations, reputation, and crisis advisor to leaders of premier law firms, that's you, and corporations internationally. I'm also the on record PR podcast host. That fits perfectly. And it tells my whole business story that I want to tell in a snap. Your current position where you work is going to be auto-populated by all the data you put into your bio. So you'll have a drop-down menu there. So where it says add new position, if you don't have Lathrop GPM, LLP, you can add it.
Gina,
Yes.
one quick thing. I know it's really easy to default to us having a comma, but we actually don't have a comma. So
No
people
comma.
go to
Okay.
look for it. It's Lathrop GPM LLP is the formal name. So
Okay.
I know
Thank
most
you.
firms do have commas and we're not usually doing the full formal name. So it's an easy mistake to make.
I
but
apologize for that, but
that's
thank
okay.
you for that correction.
Nope. But I will
And-
chime in and say many of you are still associated with Lathrop Gage or GPM. So this is really important. And sorry if I stole your thunder on that.
You
Gina.
stole my thunder.
Sorry.
But that's okay. And that's a great point. So make sure it's correct. And unlike me, where I said comma. And then when this is the next part of that page, at the bottom of that same page, you're going to see another pencil where you can add your contact information, which is crucial to using LinkedIn as a business development tool. And this is what that page looks like. When you get to this page, you see this little button at the top for your profile URL. It opens this screen over here and allows you to customize your URL. So let's say you want it to be Peter Daniel. There's probably going to be other Peter Daniels. So it may be Peter. What's your middle initial, Peter? C? Peter C. Daniel. Did I get that right? Yes, thumbs up. No. L? You get my drift. So make sure.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button.
There
F,
you go.
F, Flint.
Okay, Peter Flint, or it might be Peter Flint Daniel. So if you have a name that there are a lot of people on LinkedIn with the same name, you can use this custom URL to really make it clear how to find you. You put in your website URLs, I like to put in my industry URL for legal marketing, and then you have to hit apply. So just always remember to hit the apply there. And then on the services, which we started talking about earlier, this is really important. This is where you want to make sure this section is correct. I've had people endorse me for resume writing. I mean, maybe 20 years ago, I helped my daughter write her resume recently because she's a senior in college, but that's not exactly something I want people looking for me for. And I've actually had people endorse me for litigation, and that's inaccurate. I haven't litigated in 20 years. It is not correct. In fact, I find it to be an ethical violation because I am still a licensed attorney and I do not litigate. So I had to make sure that was taken off. So you really want to make sure that this is accurate and also highlights those key things that you want to be highlighted for. Not everything under the sun. We know you know how to write briefs and argue motions, and but what else? What separates you from the pack? And then when you get into this part of your bio, the main part, I recommend copying what you have recently updated in your attorney bios from the website, because you all update them regularly, and change it from the third person to first person so that it's consistent. I'm going to take that comma out of there, Jasmine. It's there again right here, but associate yourself with Lathrop GPM LLP. We will fix and update this before it goes on your intranet. Jennifer, please write that down. She's my right hand. And just make sure you're associated with the right firm. The thing is, it's really important to the way people search. And Jennifer, you were going to share a point here as well.
Yes, absolutely. So LinkedIn individual profiles are where your prospective clients and current clients are going to visit, but it's important that you're linked with Lathrop GPM, because one of the routes that people will take once they qualify you or read more about you is they will go to your current position and link to your current employer to learn more about them, or potentially follow the firm as it shares information. So it is very important that it's linked accurately to Lathrop GPM so that hyperlink does work for viewers of your page.
And we really did do a search. We found that some of you still are associated with the predecessor firms, and it's time we finally got the media to stop referring to the predecessor firms, and we want to make sure we're leading by that example as well.
We've talked about a number of benefits. I'll run through this list. Again, you'll have it. But know your audience, know who you're speaking to. Just as a statistic, 83% of in-house counsel rank bios as very important when they're looking through opportunities to hire new counsel. So it's important that you're speaking to the right audience, you're focusing on any benefits, highlighting what's important. You can use successes and experience. Be personable. I know that we'll share a slide on this later, but you can use content from your Lathrop GPM website bio. If it isn't, you do want to change it to the first person. It again humanizes it. It makes it feel like it's coming from you personally on LinkedIn as you're building your network. And use keywords and terms. Think about your client base and then many acronyms that might be relevant to your industry. People who have deep knowledge of your industry might be using to search for content or for individuals. Those are the types of words, phrases, acronyms you want to be using when you're filling out the content on your bio. I also want to mention something that Gina touched on a prior slide, and we may have it coming up, but I don't want to forget it. An accurate headshot is very important. We would recommend that you use the headshot from Lathrop GPM. I can't tell you how many stories we have heard over COVID where people get on the call and they are very distracted the first few minutes of the call because the person or the people that they're seeing on the Zoom call don't necessarily match the same individual that they have previously seen on a website or LinkedIn bio. I would say generally a headshot has a shelf life of about 5 years or so. So just keep that in mind. I'm not advocating for new headshots every year, certainly, but it is important that how you appear visually to prospective and current clients does accurately reflect how you will appear in meetings and on Zoom.
And team, we have 4 minutes left, so I'm going to zoom through the last couple of things. Update your bio at least quarterly, schedule it in Outlook, share the content, tag others, connect with clients, prospects, colleagues, referral sources, people that you speak with on webinars, association leaders, journalists. Engage in conversation. Conversation is what creates your content being seen and people seeing you, and post things on LinkedIn that are relevant. That means, and I've already said it, you want to like other people's content, comment on it, share it, and send messages as well. If you do all 4 of these things, you will see great exposure to your content. Just some more examples of how folks in your firm are sharing content. Some quick messaging best practices, strong and relevant message, Use the word I, it's okay here, tags others, and use good visuals and make sure that they are not copyrighted by somebody else. If you're looking for content to share, this is where you can find it on your website. This is an example of how I looked. I shared an article and I can see that 2,000, almost 2,500 people looked at it. What's most important in this data is we work with law firms, accounting firms, and banks. And that's who we see reading our content. And we see that there are decision makers in the right geographic regions. So that means the content that was shared, at least this content, was the right kind of content to target our audience. So, and that was shared by me, not the firm. Jen, take it home.
Yes. So thank you again for the opportunity to present today. Hopefully there are a number of takeaways to help you improve your engagement and your bio on LinkedIn. But as you'll see here, content shared by employees, so your attorneys, your staff, receives 8 times more engagement than content shared by your brand channel, which would be the Lathrop GPM channel. So if you approach this in a very strategic way and think about what value, what information is valuable to your network and prospective network, you really can support your professional development and the development of the firm in many ways and really help expedite the business development and lead generation and brand engagement process, which will, of course, benefit everyone at the firm.
Jasmine, I'm turning it back to you.
Great. Just wanted to say thank you to all our attendees and thank you, Gina, Jennifer, Peter, and Sarah for taking us through all of this today. As I mentioned earlier in the call, we are going to be having a second part of this that will focus specifically on leveraging LinkedIn for business development, and we look forward to bringing that to you all in early 2022. So thanks for attending, and if anybody has any questions following this, feel free to reach out to me, anybody on the marketing team, your business development manager, and we will, if we don't know the answer off the top of our head, we will certainly follow up with any of our presenters today to get you the right information. Thanks, everyone.